folks. Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone so you can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And it's always invigorating to connect with cats, musicians who are able to play all styles of music, and they understand the idea of serving the song no matter what it is, whether it's jazz or blues or rock or funk. And then obviously it's even more engaging to find cats that are continually learning, wanting to challenge themselves with new types of music, and ultimately paving the way for future generations' understanding of how real music is made and the new development of musical vocabulary as well. And my guest applies to all those criteria, and just back from Alaska with the Greenleaf Rustlers. John Molo, an honor. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, it's great to be with you again, Jake. And the last time we were together, we were in that entryway into, I think, Moe's and up in the Santa Cruz area, and we had a great conversation. So it's great to get back together with you again. And yes, I did get back from Alaska with the Greenleaf Rustlers, and we had 3 nights of great music, I thought.
You know, we just let in with Henry from Moe's Alley from that night we did the first interview. And is there a way for, I'm just going to read you this quote from that I had a chance to do a Facebook Live with Ron Carter last summer. And then I want you to just want you to riff on this any way you want, related to the Greenleaf Rustlers or any bands that you're in. He said, "Rhythm sections in and of themselves do not increase musical vocabulary, but they certainly assist in that process. We're the backdrop of the soloists, which is piano, bass, and drums in this case. Our output and impact on their solos are a major force in whatever direction they choose to take their solo. We're not individually responsible for them playing different necessarily. As a group of 3 in this case, our individual concepts of how to play a rhythm, how to play changes, how to be a presence in the construct of the solo, in mounting the form, in maintaining whatever musical intent the band has, we share in that responsibility, depending on the horn player's responsibility to trust our judgment, to trust our direction in the music. Hopefully it will make them play notes that they practice at home. I call it their kitchen solos." You know, and I've interviewed Stanley Clark about this, and I really want to get you on the record as well. How can rhythm sections increase musical vocabulary?
Traditional upright, and occasionally on piccolo bass. He has a really interesting take, and he mentioned horn player. So if you would, in my world, we'll switch that to the storyteller, the singer-songwriter. My job with those guys is to make them feel so comfortable that they're going to sing their best. Now, singers, a lot of interpretation there, whether it's John Fogerty or Chris Robinson, Dave Nelson. Everybody has a certain comfort zone, and I can pretty much tell by the body language of the singer and the way they're singing if I'm doing my job correctly. So for me, in my most recent endeavor, this last weekend in Alaska, my thing is to get Chris into that place where he's not thinking about it, he's just feeling it. He's an excellent singer. So my thing, and from the rhythm section, is to get those other players comfortable. And interestingly enough, even though the drum set is not traditionally tuned to perhaps A440 or a piano, we have to help the players groove and play in tune and feel comfortable. So that's a lot of where my responsibility is. And when Ron mentioned something about the kitchen solo, the way you feel when you're that's what you want to get those guys to. You want them to be comfortable enough to just give it their all. And it's singers, yes, but also the soloists that you're playing with. And occasionally we are responsible, I think, for taking it into some, uncharted territory. So if I've played a solo with one of the guys, say we've got a guitar solo, and then the next thing that comes up is maybe a sax solo, I'm going to change the sonic landscape, so to speak, when the guy starts his solo, maybe bring it down dynamically, or give him some kind of space where he can, articulate what he wants to do. So in my opinion, that's the job of being a really good drummer. Making those other players feel comfortable, so comfortable that they want you back. And that's my thing right now. People say, when are you going to stop playing? When they stop calling me.
Well, no, okay, so, I mean, because we're talking to a cat here who plays all music, and you could find him in almost any setting and burning all the way to the heavens. And, like you go back to, for instance, the Plug Nickel sessions, which I've chronicled quite a bit. It was Tony Williams, Ron Carter, and and Herbie.
Sure.
The story.
I don't know. Absolutely. I think anybody going into jam band music or improvisational music should definitely check out Plug Nickel.
Well, no. What I want to get at is this story, and if you know it, you can stop me. But the story that comes out of that is that, Ron's wife was having a baby, so he was actually going back and forth every night after the gigs to New York to spend time in the hospital with his wife. But the point is that they were getting bored of it was getting kind of to be a formula trip with Miles. So Herbie and Tony and Ron, they got together and they made a blood oath, and they said, listen, we are going to play the music how we feel it tonight, because we're bored right now. And when they got to the gig, Miles had no idea, but he goes, yo, we're recording tonight. And they're like, oh man, they're like, all right, we got to go with it anyway. We're going to do it. And what they did was it basically was the beginning of taking the jazz basically the Great American Songbook and leaving the head of the tune and breaking up time and form and going off into 16 or 17 minute instrumentals and then coming back in. And Miles was totally cool with it. And the point is that you could look at that, or you could look at the idea of even going, like when I interviewed Tony Orlando. Tony Orlando used to go to the Village Gate with Bill Cosby and watch Latin Candido and Tito Puente, and there was no trap set. But what Tony told me in that was, I understood, it became those rhythms, the non-traditional rhythm sections, no drummer, that became a language of its own. Is there a time you can point in your career when you felt like the rhythm section was, I'm always searching for new vocabulary, and whether it's easily translatable to my ear or not. Is there a way for you to talk about when you, in a rhythm section, actually helped expand vocabulary in music?
You mean the first time I remember doing it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you want to get, yeah, exactly. I mean, or just sometime when you were in any setting where it was like, wow, that we never played it that way, and we've never played it that same way again.
Yeah, man. I was in Virginia Beach. I remember exactly one of the first time I started getting into that. And it's sort of Plug Nickel tradition. We were playing what we would call like American clave, like most of the listeners would know it as Not Fade Away, that groove, that and I was playing with Bobby Hornsby and Bruce Hornsby, and we were in Virginia Beach. And I had been hanging with some of the locals before the last set, and we were out back in the alley talking about music and girls and politics and sports and all the stuff you talk about, what was happening back then. And I went back in and we started playing that groove. And out of nowhere, I just started playing 2 and 4. And the band responded, and we took off into this other thing, total different direction, with a different feel, broke it down, then went back into the second line, kind of traditional clave feel. And afterwards I thought, now that, if I was in the audience, that would have really gotten me. The band was going for it. It was uncharted territory in a certain way, even though it was not ridiculously technical. It was just a primordial metric modulation. It just worked.
Oh, I love it.
And so that was one of the first moments for me where I actually gave myself permission to go for that. The other guys were cool with it. You were driving the bus a little bit, but you were providing a harmonic, a rhythmic landscape for them to play over. And so that was one of my first sort of epiphanies doing that. But you got to remember, those guys that you're mentioning, and I would say this for all musicians, when you listen to jazz, that doesn't mean you're going to end up playing it.
Absolutely.
It just means you're listening to it.
I dig.
And it's a major influence for me. I was a jazz major at the University of Miami, but when I started playing with Phil Lesh, he liked that. He liked that aspect of my playing, and that's why I did so many shows. And when I first started working with Phil, and to a certain degree Bobby, but mostly Phil, I said, I can't really do the impersonation of Billy, Kreutzmann, or Mickey. And Phil was like, well, John, that's why we hired you, to be yourself. You do your thing. And I thought, oh, well, that's a refreshing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I dig. That's
a good outlook. He didn't want, he didn't want me to pay, to do a tribute to any one particular guy. Be myself. And so, yeah, that's why we hired
that's just what Miles kept turning his back on Coltrane when he first joined the band, because Coltrane kept saying, what do you want me to play? What do you want me to play? And Miles didn't actually verbally express it, but Coltrane eventually figured out he was turning his back on him because he wanted him to be himself. He brought him into the band to be himself, and that's what I love about people like Phil. What's interesting is that I'm just so excited. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice, and I think we're going to start off here with one. It's deep in the bag. I think you're going to get it. Take a listen to it, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Well, when you say to get that sound, there's a lot of different sounds of R&B. Like Beaver generally played a lot of Gibson stuff, mainly hollow bodies like L5s, NES 295s, things like that. Now you take a guy, like a lot of the records that were on Stax with Steve Cropper, that was a Telecaster. There's a lot of the guys would use ES335s, or a lot of the blues players use like those thin semi-hollow electrics, like B.B. King used the 355 and a 345 and 335. Actually, some of his very early stuff, he even used the Les Paul. But Freddie King, he used the 345. Albert King actually was known for using an old Flying V, which those guitars are astronomically expensive now. So there's not one guitar that kind of is the sound of all R&B and everything. It's a combination of a lot of stuff. The Fender sound is more like a thin sound, great for rhythmic stuff, and you'll hear that on, like Curtis Mayfield used Fenders, just a lot of the guys like with James Brown were using solid body guitars. One of them even used like this acoustic guitar, this acoustic solid body electric called the Black Widow, because they wanted that really trebly, thin kind of for the rhythm type of chinks that you hear in a lot of the old R&B.
I dig.
It wasn't mostly about solos back then. It was more about playing the tune. The real body of the tune lies in the rhythm of the tune, not in the solos. If the rhythm is great and everything is locked in and together, you can solo over that and it sounds great. But if the rhythm's not there, nothing works.
You want to take a guess at who that is?
Well, it's funny. During that, I was like, I recognized this voice. It took me about 30 seconds, and I went, I talked to this guy. This guy is actually someone I know really well.
I know you do.
And then I went, it's Norm. Norm's air guitar.
Molo's 1 for 1, dude. You got a bass knocked driving in 2 runs. That was my interview with.
Oh man, Norm. He is just. I mean, we're tight in a number of ways. He's one of my favorite local merchants. I live a couple of miles away. But just to show you how cool and accommodating he is, I walked in there one day with a young artist that I work with. You know her as Katie Skeen.
Absolutely.
She's in California Kind, young Katie.
Yeah.
And they were so nice to her. She picked up a guitar, she played it. Norm heard her and said, "Let me video this. We'll put you on the website." 100,000 hits or views later, Katie's in there. And I went in recently with another young musician. Interestingly enough, his name is Brian Jones. His parents were not aware that they named him after one of the Rolling Stones. Young Brian Jones. We know him as the wonderful lead guitarist in Vampire Weekend with the big afro, or the bass player with Gwen Stefani. Walked in there with Brian. He was immediately embraced by Norm and the entire staff. Played some bass. Norm, I can't say enough about his just general demeanor. He's a wealth of information, and he's a nice person.
Well, the reason I played that, because obviously Norm's rare. I mean, the dude, I just have to. I have a deep primordial gut feeling that you and him were cooking. I mean, he was in a band called Kathmandu down in Miami. Did you know each other when you were down there?
No, we didn't, but we talked about it a lot. We talked about a number of the bands down there and players. There was a band called the Impact of Brass. We, of course, talked about the local phenom at the time, Jaco Pastorius, God rest his soul, and how Bruce Hornsby and I crossed paths with Jaco a little bit. I saw Jaco down at Miami, but we did talk a little bit about Miami, and, you know, I know him as a merchant, but he, selling guitars initially, but what a wealth of information and a lot of great stories. He's a wonderful guy to know.
Yeah, because I saw that Katie Marie. I saw her. I saw that clip from that store, and I said, "Wait a minute." I mean, like, well, either Molo is a local customer, or they're going back to the days of like University of Miami. I mean, were you? I ask you this. Whatever comes to your mind first, you can just riff on it. But what have you been able to take from your experience in the academy, in academia, and consistently be able to translate it onto the bandstand? I ask you only because if musical vocabulary is being created today, because of the lack of touring circuits, vigorous touring circuits, it's being made kind of within the four walls of academia, and a lot of kids are coming out with huge chops and huge facility, but they don't really know how to have that essence of the conversation that me and you thrive on with Motion and LaFaro and Evans. And I'm like, well, okay, you got your musical degree, so tell me what you can honestly apply, real-time application on the bandstand from what you learned at University of Miami.
Okay, that's a deep question. I'm going to try to touch on this briefly. At the University of Miami, it was a very fun school to go to. A lot of energy, a lot of ambition. Now, we were music majors, and we were bowing down at the altar of Coltrane and Charlie Parker and traditional great bebop. But at the same time, there was a student body, a studentry that was listening to Pink Floyd and the Stones and Queen. So when I would come back from the music department, we would do something called, sitting down and listening to vinyl, a communal listen.
Communal. Thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so, and that's where I noticed this. This weekend, we did 3 gigs, and we were hanging with Chris Robinson, who I think is just a great lead singer, and he lives music to the point where when we hang out, we don't put earphones in. Chris, listen together. He just plays it in the air. He doesn't put in earplugs or headphones. So this weekend, whether we were listening to Gabor Szabo or Muddy Waters or this latest rap artist that Chris found out of Atlanta, we listened together. So while the music is going down, we're like, oh, man, that's interesting. Gabor Szabo did a version of Bang Bang. I know it from Sonny and Cher. They had a hit with it. It's communal listening is very important. So at the university, in the day, there were groups of 4 or 5 people that would listen together and discuss the music afterwards. It wasn't isolated. And I think that's a huge, huge factor that's missing. That's why what you said, I'll reiterate, Bruce Hornsby said a similar thing. Man, there are so many young, talented Americana players that come out, whether it's Miami or Berkeley or, USC, or just learning it on their own through video. But is it great? Is it inspired? Is it original? That's the whole thing. The technical part can be taught.
Right.
But the communal part and understanding what moves people, the primordial part. You're going from the heart up into the head at the university. What the university doesn't touch on is from your heart or your head down into the primordial parts of getting it down to the point where people embrace it. So we could play really atonal, far out music. If it has a great groove, like a James Brown thing going on in the background, some feel that just is infectious, you can play that way. You can take it out harmonically, and that's what I've always wanted to do. You get adventurous, but keep something in there that can keep the people, like, in it. And so that's what I got out of, like the university. But I got the technical part from the school. The listening part I got from hanging out with just, we'll call them everyday students, the regular student body.
Did you?
And that's where I heard,
yeah.
I remember the first time I heard Queen, I was like, man, I think Ira Greenberg found it. I don't know, one of my roommates.
Ira Greenberg. I mean, this is yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he had all the latest stuff, or even that was in college. But if I go back to high school, I remember the guy that had all the cool records was Hoyt Vanderberg. I don't know how he found out about these records, but it would be to the point where we'd go over to his house in the afternoon after school, and he'd say, "Oh, I got this musician I found. His name is Muddy Waters or Howlin' Wolf, and he's got an electric guitar." And we'd listen to him and we'd say, "Man, he's like playing Zeppelin and Stones tunes. How'd this old guy find out about Zeppelin?" And, of course, he was like, "No, man, Zeppelin found out about him. Stones found out about these guys." So I always had some kind of, indirect musical mentor when it came to vinyl. Somehow I found these guys, and they were not well, they played a little bit, but they weren't, they had other skills. But as far as music goes, they could listen and enlighten. And both those guys did it for me.
I have a couple. This is interesting because Leland Sklar, I've interviewed 5 times. He said the same thing. I mean, number one, the idea of a concept album has kind of disappeared. You have younger musicians now who are making EPs and things like that. But like when you're with Chris and Greg and Barry and Pete and you guys are listening, okay, so you take a cover that Gabor Szabo did. I mean, are you listening to that with the idea of how do we incorporate that into certain tunes that you're playing, or are you thinking if maybe we can actually put this into our bag?
Probably both. Mine is just an idea. Like I remember, I just meeting Chris and said, "Man, that was really good, that vocal," and he was like, "Yeah, man, the guy's really good." So, as far as tune selection goes, mostly since Chris is singing, and it's basically, he's the leader in that way. He's going to pick the tunes. But as far as listening, yeah, I was like, that's a great piece. I mean, we do a Bee Gees song called "To Love Somebody," and a lot of people think that's kind of a sappy pop tune. Maybe it is, but it's also a great tune. It's a great song.
No, it
Chris
just
sings it great. And I wouldn't have thought to put that on the list, but when it was there, I was like, wow. And then we played it, and I was like, I know this. I know the emotion of this, the spirit of this song, what it's supposed to be. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No. I mean, you know what it is? It's just because the significance of music, especially with, I'm 41, but even younger generations, it's music is made. I remember people saying, Phil Ranlin, great trombone player, music is made for pacification. Music, Dee Bridgewater, music is now made for multitasking. You said it best. I mean, people have their earphones in. So it's very isolationist. And I'm just trying to get the idea when you actually have musicians and then take it a step further and it's an actual band, when you're having these listening sessions, you guys play essentially mostly your own versions of tunes. But, when you're listening to new stuff, I'm always curious as if, with a bunch of seasoned veterans, is it about incorporating, extending the bag of music or finding parts of those tunes to say, this might work in this version that we play. It's always fascinating to me how that stuff works out because people don't listen to music as together anymore. That's really I think it's a huge issue.
It absolutely is. Because after you listen to 45 minutes of music or even a single, a 4-minute, you can discuss it and the arrangement, the feel of it, why it worked, what the lyric was, the melody. I just wanted to touch briefly on, you mentioned Lee Sklar. I've played with Lee probably, 30 times over the last 20 years.
Wow.
The guy, I don't think he's ever made a mistake. And if he did make a mistake, I think maybe one time he went to chorus maybe a half a bar earlier. I looked up and he looked at me like, I can't believe I just did that. One mistake in 20 years with Lee.
And it always feels so good. I mean, what settings were you on tour with him? What was going on?
No, usually just some kind of like a studio date. I mentioned like doing Hill Street Blues or Hardcastle McCormick, some Mike Post shows where you go in and sight read. Leland would be on those because, you don't think it because he's so natural. He's a great reader and great just sort of like he understands, as John Scofield would say to me, I understand the spirit of the Grateful Dead, what's trying to come across. Lee understands the spirit of and intent of most music, just the way it's written. He's an incredible player. So when I sit down with Lee, we really don't talk about a whole lot, just how you doing, is your life okay, are you healthy? And then we sit down and play music. And one of the things I loved about the last time I worked with Lee was he was about 10 feet away from me, or maybe let's say 5 yards away from me, or like 15 feet, and we just looked at each other the whole time. We didn't really talk about what we were going to play, but I could see his hands and he could see my hands. And, I know when he's there that the session's probably going to go down pretty smoothly, and I hope he feels that way about me. Just a great player. So Lee I have a great intimacy with, but it's unspoken. We don't hang out, but when we see each other, it's great to see him, and I consider him a musical brother. And for the people out there, you know him as the guy with the big beard, and you've seen him with James Taylor, but what a player he is.
Well, let me tell you, man, I mean, the section, which was Kunkel, him, Durgie, and Cooch, they opened for early on the original version of Mahavishnu Orchestra, and they went on tour together. And sure enough, after the tour, Billy Cobham's in the studio doing his first solo album, Spectrum, and Stanley Clarkson there with Billy. And after they did a couple of takes of the tunes, Billy's like, there's just too much language here. There's just too much talking going on. And sure enough, picks up the phone because he had watched the section. I mean, the section wasn't trying to be Mahavishnu. They could never have done that. They were doing their thing. And
I remember them. Sure.
Yeah, and he called Lee Sklar and said, "Listen, I need you to come out to play a couple of tunes." And I mean, so Lee takes a red eye to New York, and the next thing you know, they're playing Stratus, that hypnotic tune with Tommy Bolin, and that's Lee and Billy cooking the groove. I mean, it's just
Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
unreal.
There you go, man. A lot of people don't know that's Leland.
That's Leland, man. He's freaking ridiculous, man. I mean, listen, I'll get your email and send you all this stuff, these interviews, because you are just going to be dying. I got another Name That Voice. This one's going to be close to your heart as well. Let's take a listen, and we'll come back.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you, when the Grateful Dead started, they would do just, the very first years, like, what was that,
65?
4,
yeah.
65, yeah. I'd go along on the gigs, and they would play these clubs, and that was go-go dancing and stuff like that, and they would just play stock songs and everything. And then once in a while, there'd be one song where Jerry would stretch out, and that was very unusual. And they kept doing it and developing that. And pretty soon, a couple of years, 3 years later or so, they're doing these long extended jams as the main thing of the song, and then morphing it into another song. And then all of a sudden they're playing another song. And it turns out that last song that they played was a group of songs, and it lasted 20 minutes. Yeah. And then by the time the new writers started in 1970, I would be backstage. I would be back behind the amplifiers on stage watching the Dead play. After our set, we'd play our opening set, and then I'd get on stage and watch the Dead set. And I tell you, people would just leave in droves. They would start one of those long jams, and the seats would empty out. People would go to the lobby. The excuse was like, I got to get something to drink or something like that. And it just flood out of the building. I remember time talking to Steve Parrish, going, look at them. They're just flooding out of the building,
This is unbelievable.
Well, this was a new thing. This was a brand new thing. People were there to see a rock band, and then all of a sudden there's this, you know, and people wanted to hear, I guess, people wanted to hear a song that was identifiable, you know, that you could say, oh, I heard that song. Okay, I like this song, you know. And Garcia was just like firm about it. No, we're not going to go there. And they had the record label and various officials, promoters and stuff saying, please, you know, play the song, you know. And Garcia would say, who needs it? He would get lectured by somebody, and the person would say, you know, you see it, it's this way, and we can make more money, we sell more tickets. People want this, and people don't need it. So why don't you just, we sit over to that, and Garcia says, who needs it?
You know who that is?
Of course. That is my
yes.
musical buddy, part-time monologist, part-time oracle, and like I said, great storyteller. That's Dave Nelson.
He's darn right
who
it
I will
is.
be performing with.
I'm going to come
Am
see.
I correct?
You are 2 for 2 with 2 doubles to the gap so far. I mean, it's unbelievable. They're going to get harder as we go along here. But this is what I wanted to talk to you about, and it's this idea, like, okay, you go see Greenleaf Rustlers. You guys are not playing any original tunes, but the truth is, you make those. I mean, like George Porter would say that when they were on Bourbon Street, back when it was really Bourbon Street, pre-meters, they would be taking Stephen Stills tunes and turning them inside out, upside down. You guys do the same thing, and that to me is a righteous way to do it. But the baby boomer generation, and I don't want to be overly general, but you know, Journey, Steve Miller, Tower of Power. I mean, people are going to see and hear things that they're used to hearing. And the thing about that stood out for me about that, what David was talking about, was the tenacity of Garcia and the Dead, for the most part, to say, you know, we are going to play with the spirit. Like you said, Schofield, they're going to play the spirit of jazz. They're not playing jazz, but they're going to play improvisational music the way Lee Morgan or Miles Davis, they'd say, listen, we dig our music. And the message to the audience was, we hope you dig the music, but even if you don't, we're still going to play it. And I just feel like today it's like we've gotten into this thing where it's like people want to go and hear exactly what it sounds like on the album. And I'm wondering, with Hornsby or Fogerty, or even before that, was there a time in a band where you guys were like, nah, like Nelson said, what's the point? What's the use? We're not going to play this. We're going to play. We are going to do something new, and we have the tenacity to stick with it to get the momentum in order to grow. Can you just riff on that?
Yeah, man, you got to have that musical endurance, we would call it. One of my friends, we know him as an author and a writer and a musician, as a venture capitalist, whatever, Roger McNamee. His observation about the music business is you better have some thick skin and endurance to be able to get through it. And fortunately for Jerry, or Dave's description where he goes, who needs it, really, that 3-minute song? There's so many people doing that. Let's go for something else. Now, the Dead had the musical endurance. Their audience found them, and they found their audience. Sometimes that doesn't happen musically. Sometimes it's under the radar. People don't go to see it. But somehow the Dead were able to get through that period solo. They don't leave. They relish it. They know they went back to hear it. If you recorded the set or the music and you went back to listen to it and you'd say, oh, right, that's where they made that mistake. I was there. I noticed that mistake. And then they didn't derail. They kept going. They got it going. Whereas if you heard a recording of like a Journey cover band or, you know, Don't Stop Believin' by Journey or whoever, and they're doing it exactly like it, like the album, how would you know you were there even? It's so
nailed it.
Antiseptic. And there's not really anything too special about it. I've, over the years, gone back and looked at things like, you know, I got to play with Don Henley on the Grammys. We played End of the Innocents, or you mentioned playing with Fogerty. It's a little bit the same each night. With John, I always was like, John, or to his brother Bob Fogerty, I'd say, Bob, let's switch the set list up, man. Why would you come back 2 nights? Or 2 nights in a row to hear the exact same show and rap. change it up a little bit. And that's what the Dead did. They were so ahead of the curve. So when we go to do 3 nights in Alaska with Chris, you can pretty much count on the fact that we're going to do a different set every night. And the song that you may have missed that first night, you'll get it the next night. And I think that's one of the things that promoters, some of the, I don't want to call them dinosaurs, but just in the traditional sense of the word, they want that thing, that tangible sameness to sell tickets. But in the long run, I think what sells tickets, especially to our audience, is the delivery and the authenticity, and to make it special for that audience every night. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah, I mean, the Dead are, to me, it's like they're a little bit of an outlier. But I mean, all those bands from that bastion. I mean, the Sons of Champlin. I mean, none of those guys were. I mean, their live performance. The love-hate relationship with the Grateful Dead, and I never saw them once. But I can't stop listening to Live Dead. And it's, early 80s Grateful Dead especially. But it's like, people are like, I hate the Grateful Dead. It's because they've been listening to the jukebox versions of Skeletons in the Closet. I mean, none of those bands, Sons of Champlin, Sly Stone, the list goes on, even, Santana to a degree, none of their shows, live shows, were ever, I forget the word you used. It just, they were always different than what was on the album. To me, that is revelatory. I just wonder about, like, with Pete Sears, for instance. I mean, when I interviewed Pete, he kind of said, basically, as it relates to his bass playing, he doesn't even know where it comes from. He just feels it. He just plays it. I mean, it's just totally natural. Obviously, he's an amazing piano player too. He's just amazing. But I mean, do you have to have a certain kind of constitution as a musician in order to let the reins go and allow things?
Yes.
The tempos to speed up and slow down? I think it's just important to talk about some of the nuanced qualities away from the techniques and the book learning, and what it takes in order to have a tune that the tune, and then you're able to take it out into it and make it something completely different.
Yeah, I'll mention a couple people, and now Fogerty I'll mention by name. John can jam, man. You listen to Heard It Through the Grapevine or
Right.
Susie Q.
Yeah.
But when we played live, I would occasionally try to prompt him and the band to just let it go a little bit. Don't play the sequence that you know is going to work. Give the audience a treat, and let's go for it. John is not so much out of that world. He could be if he wanted to. But his renditions of those songs are pretty standard. And then there's another guy that, and the audience will know who this is. I don't even have to mention it. When you're playing drums up there, you're looking around. You're like, I would say, you're like the border collie guy. You're trying to get all the pack in together playing.
Right.
So, I got this one guy every once in a while, and he's a stray. He's a runner. He's always like, he's not with the pack. And we'll start the song off. We'll count it off, and all of a sudden he'll play one note, and he'll turn around and start like EQing his amp for like a minute. And so the band gets into a groove, and then he'll come up after he EQs and gets the sound together and kind of look at, and you didn't join in until now, and now you're trying to tell me and the band where you would like it. And that, to me, is one of the ultimate no-nos of jam band. It's supposed to be communal, not one guy running it. So, and you know who I'm talking about. I know you know. But that's one of the tough things. So when people will, like, turn around and, like, especially with Phil, if anybody ever turns to the band and says, speed it up or slow it down, I say, tell Phil, and I'll go with him.
Right.
But I'm not gonna split it up, because basically if you have a chart, like, written music, we'll go back to that, like the difference. If it says accelerando on it, to speed up,
yeah,
that's the whole band. It's not one guy. You don't look at the percussion section and go, okay, speed it up. Accelerandos, deaccelerandos, crescendos, pianissimo, forte, all that's written for the entire ensemble, whether it's a duet, even a solo performance, the dynamics. So that's that's the hard part, that the band needs to move together in a communal way. And I'm not alpha dogging it out there, but I'm trying to get everybody into a comfortable spot. So that's one of the things in jamming. Give yourself permission, and don't try to control it. Let it go. Like you said, every once in a while, can you just, I think you were saying, can you let it go, man? Can you
let the reins go? Yeah. But I just want to be...
As Ornette would say, Ornette Coleman told Bruce, and I wish I could quote him a little bit, because Bruce does a good vocal impersonation of Ornette. It sort of sounded like Mike Tyson to me, but Ornette said to Bruce, they're not playing the music, they're playing a sequence.
Right.
They're playing the notes that fit in those chords. I don't want to hear the sequence. I want to hear music. I really relate to what Ornette said. I wasn't there, but that's what I walked away with when Bruce told me about Ornette talking about harmonics or music. The thing that stuck out was not the technical explanation, but to play music. That's what we're doing up there. Don't play anybody. You can teach somebody, like I said, the technique of how to play bebop, the note selection, what goes over certain changes, as they say. But to play music, that's a different thing. So that's what we're going for. And anyway, I hope. No, I
do. I mean, this is like. I mean, it's like a dream. I just interviewed Gary Barone, and he was talking about just the idea of themes and variations. But I just want to go back because the phone cut out for 1 second. With this unknown, this dude, this person on stage, they are going to tune their instrument for a while, and everybody gets into a groove, and then that person comes back, and then they want it on their terms. Is that what I read you correctly there?
Yes, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. They took the time. They weren't ready to go. Their instrument wasn't in tune, or their sound wasn't right. And the band gets into the space, and the individual comes in and like, oh, I want to change it now. I'm kind of like, that's a tough one, right?
Yeah. Well, I believe I know who you're talking about, and it is a no. I mean, it's to me, there's yeah, I totally dig it. I mean, you're throwing so much great content. Would you say that when you started to play with Hornsby and you were opening shows for the Grateful Dead, did that sort of harmonic, that Ornette concept of no bar lines and that kind of, the Leshian approach, did that rub off on you guys at all, or had you already sort of been doing that kind of stuff?
Oh, man, well, Bruce, here's the deal. Bruce knew early on. Bruce is a sagacious cat, man. However you say the word. He's the sage, man, in a lot of ways. Hard-working. It's hard to outwork that guy. He's incredible. Great role model for work ethic, Bruce Hornsby. But Bruce, in essence, when Brent was having some issues physically and the guys started talking to Bruce about maybe playing with him, and then eventually Bruce ended up playing and Brent passed away. I said, why would you want to do it? And he says, because Jerry and Hunter wrote probably 40 great tunes, and Bobby and Barlow wrote another 10, and Phil's got some, and their catalog is great. The songs are great. Yeah. That's what makes the band great, not the players necessarily. So it rubbed off on us a little bit, and we were at, I think, Laguna Seca. Bill Graham was there, Ry Cruder, The Dead, Bruce Hornsby in the Range. So we go out there, we play, and we do pretty well. And the band is in the middle of doing the Touch of Grey video at night, late at night. So it's a happening scene, man. I'm digging it.
Wow.
First time I heard them was maybe '73 in American Union. They're still great. The audience is great. And so we play the first night, and the Dead's doing the video thing, and then we come out the next day, and it's mid-afternoon, I think. And we play the first couple of the tunes. Bruce and I recall this a little bit differently, and two young men in the front row look up at Bruce and say, "Hey, Bruce, you're not going to play the same set, are you?" And
oh, man.
Bruce had a bit of an epiphany of like, oh, that's right. We've been playing this same set, across the United States basically every night. But here we are the next day playing for the same crowd. They don't want to hear the same set. So as I recall, Bruce went into some blues, I got the blues in my breakfast cereal or some old song, and we changed it up a little bit. But that was one of the things we learned quickly. It didn't take Bruce long to, remember, oh, right, this is the Grateful Dead. These people were here yesterday, the same people. We got to change it up. So that rubbed off on us in a big way. And to have that return customer, so to speak, those people, if you look at it like they've hired us for the afternoon or the evening, we are there to make their spirituality or whatever come to life. It's the obligation of noblesse oblige. It's the obligation of the artist, the nobility, to connect and elevate that audience, move them to some place. So that's what I got out of it, and I think Bruce learned the same thing. You go to hear Bruce, even though he has hit records, he changes his setup. His musical set probably every night, and that rubbed off on us for sure.
It's we're about 10 games into the season. Major League Baseball, Tigers are off. My team, the Tigers, are off to a 7-3 start. Ron Gard and I think actually we might win the division this year, believe it or not, even though we have a totally no-name team. But you're 2 for 2 so far. Let's see if you can go 3 for 3 right now on the Jake Feinberg Show.
Man.
Here we go.
We'll make that baseball analogy.
Yeah, here we go.
Well, what Charlie Parker told me one time when I'd asked him a question about what did he practice. He told me, you listen to the radio and everything that comes on there, you play with it and you figure out what key it's in and you play with it. And once you do that, that means you cross styles, you cross tonalities, you cross every element possible in music. And I think that's very true. And I don't tell kids to practice what they hear on the radio because they don't really listen to the radio now. It's all online. Everything is online now. And, so they don't have the variety. Either you're listening to hip-hop or you're not. That's what it is today. And other than pop music, then popular music, what's his name, Justin Bieber and those kind of people present another kind of music that young people are interested in because it is attractive because of the money that they make doing that music. They don't make any money imitating Ornette Coleman or Coltrane. That's artistic. That they don't make money doing that.
I know, but all right, this is a 2-strike count, and I'm going to throw you. Who do you got? Who do you got for us? Do you want to take a guess?
Yeah, I know. I think I know who this is.
Hey, by the way, I want to give you a clue. I want to give you.
Accent.
I want to give you a clue. He plays the same instrument you do.
Yeah. Okay. That really helps because I had narrowed it down to 2 people, and
oh boy,
mainly from their cadence and their being around each other. I'm going to pick my brother Zig or George Porter.
Well, first of all,
no, Johnny Vodakovich.
No, dude, Tootie Heath. Tootie Heath, man.
Where did Tootie grow up? Because his accent I thought it was George for a second.
Okay, so I'll send you all these interviews. Tootie grew up in Philly with Percy and Jimmy. Obviously,
his brothers.
Right, exactly. And Tootie and I mean, we've done a couple great interviews, and but yeah, he's Philadelphia born and raised. Zig, I haven't.
Man, I thought it was a New Orleans cat. I love his cadence. And I don't know him. I mean, I know of those.
I
brothers.
know, no.
They're legendary.
Well, no. The reason I asked you that is I believe that Molo, because I mean, there were analog cassette decks and things like that, but for the most part, you talk to David Hood from the Swampers or Tootie. He said Bird would listen to the radio of all the tunes that were being played by human beings. There weren't any drum machines, and he had to learn each of those tunes and to play them in every key. And I understand you don't have notes on the drum kit, but I'm curious about if you could talk about how you helped your ears grow by listening to all kinds of music, if that's what you did on the radio, and then how you really allowed that to become part of your constitution.
Okay. That's a funny question. So I'm going to say, yeah, I'm absolutely a radio guy. I love popular music. It's a very interesting thing. Now, the music that I'm talking about that was popular is not, Justin or the contemporary guys. I'm talking like, why was Take 5 a hit by Dave Brubeck? Paul Desmond, I think the alto player, wrote it. It's a
5/4.
Cool song. Joe Morello.
Yeah.
That became a hit. Instrumental hits surprise me. The theme from Hill Street Blues or a TV show that becomes a hit. Always been interested in that. But also, the singing, the spoken word. I had a bit of an imitation thing. I'd love to impersonate different singers for myself, not for anyone else. But love pop music. Ricky Nelson, those records growing up as a kid, I thought were super cool. Of course, Elvis, all the Motown stuff, anything I could get my hands on, I really liked. But here's the interesting part that sort of, I don't know, it really helped me. St. Francis Xavier Catholic School.
One of the hippest schools in the world. I mean, the nuns there were markedly different than the ones in Langley. You talked to me about that.
Yeah, I told you, man.
Yeah.
My nuns were singing nuns.
Dude, those were unreal. The hippest cats in the world.
Yeah, I told you that in Santa Cruz. I had those nuns, and we would sing at the drop of a hat. I think when the classroom got too unruly for the nuns, because we had a bunch of rough little kids there at St. Francis Xavier.
Yeah, inner cities of D.C., dude. I love it.
All races, colors, and creeds fighting each other in the playground. It was a beautiful thing, but we had that music thing in common. I think when we got too unruly, the nuns would just pull out Turkey in the Straw, like I said, and we'd just rip into it. So I had that great background, and my parents were always listening to music, whether it was popular or was on the radio. Whatever was on the radio at that time, my mom was digging. And then after work, my dad was digging those Bach, Brandenburg concertos, and I was just fortunate to be around it and to be able to hear it. What you touched on briefly was really interesting. If you say to most kids, can you play blues? They'll go, yeah, I'll play blues, and play the blues pattern, 12-bar, whatever. You talked about learning to play styles of music in every key.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Is that what Charlie Parker did?
He sure did.
Yeah, man. So you talked to Baracco. When did Baracco get stumped? Well, somebody threw him a blues in a very unorthodox key, Rob said. And everybody said, oh, yeah, I can play blues. Sure, man, I can play. Even I'll talk to kids that graduate from USC. Can you play like a reggae thing? Yeah, I know it. It's like they know the beat or they know the sequence. But the guts of the music is a different thing. So Baracco, I think one night, I can't remember what key the blues was in, but it was very unorthodox, and he stumbled through it, and he hated that.
Wow.
So to this day, he still practices blues in the unusual keys, the tough keys, the challenging keys. So I do think that listening to music on the radio and finding the really deep tracks, the great stuff, is the way to go. When I played recently with Benmont Tench at the Cap Theater in New York with Bill Schofield and Jackie, it's a lot of fun, but Benmont knows his records. It seems like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers had a thing with recordings, man. These guys make some cool records. But Benmont Tench really understands the element, the mood of the music, what's trying to be conveyed. And it's not an overly technical thing, but, man, he's listened to a lot of radio and a lot of music. So that's where it's at, I think, for a lot of people, the voice. I am an absolute freak for Dionne Warwick, Hal David, and Burt Bacharach.
Dude,
I think they
killer.
Put down some of the greatest stuff. And, you can hear it, Promises, Promises, What Do You Get When You Fall in Love, The Look of Love, What the World Needs Now is Love. But you go to Aretha Franklin, Say a Little Prayer. That is just, and as Stevie Wonder says, once she does one of those songs, it's hers forever. And the chorus in that is, the moment I wake up, before I put on my makeup, I say a little prayer. But when she gets to the chorus, she sets it up in a very musical way. That chorus is in 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 1. But when you go back and listen to Aretha do it, man, she makes that chorus jump. It's just unbelievable. So all these artists, that I've been mentioning, I think Aretha, Dionne, and on those Dionne Warwick records, you could correct me if I'm wrong. I'm thinking it's the great drummer Gary Chester.
You nailed it. And they were all in the same room at the same time. That's the other part of it. Gary Chester was
That's the other thing, the communal thing I was talking
about. Exactly.
You're playing with Gary Chester, man. You better be delivering some goods because he's not going to screw it up. Whether it's the Four Seasons or Aretha or whoever, Dionne, he's making those records. Little Anthony and the Imperials, he's making those records happen. And so, and it was communal. It was in a room with a band and maybe even the singer.
Rick Marotta told me that sometimes he'll be in an adjacent room and he'll hear some drum beats going on, and he's like, that's got to be a machine. This is contemporary, and he walks in, and it's a human being playing machine parts.
Yes.
It's really, I mean, what you're talking about is the feel. It has to feel good. Molo, Chester, Bill Lavorgna, Purdy, I mean, Murata, the songs felt good because everybody has their own human rhythm. I mean, is there, with any students you have, or do you feel like it's somewhat, I don't want to say it's an obligation or a job, but how do you try to wean them off of that perfect, that machine vertical sound, because it's so sterile? My daughters, future generations, I want them to be, I do my show so that future generations understand how real music is made. Do you have any, do you ever feel like, someone might get off on hip hop tracks and they, sampling and this, but the beats themselves, they're just mechanical. Do you feel an impetus to have to wean some cats off of that if you're teaching them?
Yeah, but their time comes. When they're, I remember I have a young guy I've worked with, and now he's 28. His name is Brendan McCusker. He's played with Jenny Lewis. Most recently, he had been working with Ryan Adams. Now I don't know what's going to happen with Ryan as far as touring, but this guy was playing with Ryan. Now he's 28. Now when I first started working with him, he didn't really want to talk to me about Jeff Beccaro and Toto or whatever. He was probably more into and Brendan, if you hear this, you can correct me if I'm wrong, probably more into Between the Buried and Me or Meshuggah or speed metal, something really athletic. He was 12 years old, 14. Of course that's what he's going to listen to. But like I said, by the time he got into his mid-20s, all of a sudden he found himself playing Americana. His parents were kind of like mine, a lot of music around the house. Actually, his parents were musicians. And eventually, he kind of weaned himself off of it naturally, off the machines and the sequences.
Interesting.
He's done gigs like that because kids that age do that. But he also has the other side of playing like a human. And by the way, Rick Marotta,
yep.
My favorite track is Don't Take Me Alive, Steely Dan.
Well, I saw that performance with Phil, man. I do Don't Take Me Alive. My daughters and I are cranking Peg in the car. He's rocking Peg on Asia. It's unreal.
Peg is great.
The best.
That is just... So Warren Haynes said, hey, Molo, come on down. Now, I try to impersonate Warren, but I sound like Bill Clinton. Hey, Molo, why don't you come down to the Wheel Turn tonight? We're going to play this song called Don't Take Me Alive. You know it? And I said, yeah, Royal Scam. Rick Marotta's on... It's Rick Marotta's song with those other guys playing with him.
That's right. That's right.
I love those tracks. I went up to Rick one time at the NAMM show, and, I'm an East Coast guy at heart, and Ricky's from New York. I saw Rick there, and I walk up and I go, hey, Ricky. He turned around and looked at me like he was going to knock my fucking head off.
Dude, the guy, I mean...
Rick, it's Molo. And he went, oh, hey, man, how's it going? I said, you ready for a compliment? And he goes, okay. I told him I love that track, and he was very gracious. And one of my favorite drummers, obviously.
And you know what? Did not pick up drumsticks until he was 19 years old. He just learned to dance at the Apollo with his parents and his brothers and sisters. And a lot of people don't even know this, but he was in a band called the Riverboat Soul Band with Mac Rebenak and then Charlie Neville. And Charlie moved to New York, and he taught him how to play a New Orleans shuffle. This whole thing is just so magnetic because we go back to the communal thing, and it's so desperately needed in a time when we have now technology has created so much separation and isolation to bring that stuff back together. This, I mean, again, we're channeling baseball here with Molo, and I'm going to read you this quote. I don't have the audio queued up, but I want you to just relate to it the best you can, and then analyze it. This is from Johnny V. Okay, I've done 4 interviews with Johnny. He goes, I get tremendous ideas and inspiration from watching certain sports. I love baseball. There's no clock. It's a very hip game. Anything can happen. The curvature of the ball, the curvature of the bat, the spin on the ball. It all makes for improvising. You have a given form, just like in music, most of the time. There's definitely a diagram in different form. There's a certain amount of structure. But within that structure, there's a lot of unknowns because of the curvature of the ball and the bat. There's a lot of improvising going on in baseball because you don't know where that ball is going to go. You don't know what bounce it's going to take. A team works very much like a band. Whether they're fielding or doing double plays, all this stuff is very musical to me. The reaction to the fielder's spontaneity, depending on where the ball is being hit, their reaction to it is also processed when someone is playing music. Something pops up in the air and you react before you even think about it. When the batter sees the ball come out of the pitcher's hand, the batter automatically and instinctively knows if they're going to swing at the ball or not, based on the first third of that trajectory of the pitch. He doesn't know if that ball is going to sink, if that slider is going to go over to the right. You don't know. Johnny also takes, for his students, he'll put a TV of a basketball game with the sound off and have those students improvise to the flow of the game. And I really would love you to talk about, is there any correlation for you between sports and music, rhythmically?
Yes. Johnny is more of a baseball fan than I am. I don't know Johnny that well. Of course, I know his drumming. I think we have some mutual friends from New Orleans. Love his playing. Mine is the basketball thing. I can see that. With basketball, your visualization or your, I guess it's visualization, thinking about what can happen. In baseball, you got a man on first or a man on second with one out. There's a lot of scenarios you can go through. If the balls hit you in the air, if the balls hit you on the ground. I was a Little League All-Star, and then I bailed and started playing drums. I was okay.
No, I dig.
For a little kid. Left field, center field, right field. I could hit a little bit, you know. I probably would have made the high school team. While we're on it, the technical side of it, I learned to switch hit at age 42.
Get out of here. 42? That's insane.
Yeah, man. I talked to Scott Spezio and Chili Davis about switch hit, and then I figured, well,
are you kidding me, dude? Chili Davis is I cannot believe you just dropped Chili Davis's name, dude. That is the sickest guy. I love my favorite players of all time.
And a nice guy. He told me he learned to switch hit at age like 21 or 22. So anyway, I went to the batting cage, left-handed, because I'm a drummer and sort of ambidextrous. Started to switch hit and really discovered something about my body and playing left-handed, or, you know, just the drums. I related it to it. But basketball is the one that, for me, you got 5 guys on the team. And in basketball, man, you're running a lot of times if you're on a running team and not a set-up offense. But even in half-court offense, once you start moving and the ball comes to you, there's not a lot of time for visualization of, like, what am I going to do if the ball's hit to me? It's immediate. And so your reaction time, bang, the ball hits you on the baseline, boom, you drop it into the paint, guy takes it up, you follow that shot. It's all automatic. It's a feel thing, but following the shot, the feel of the basketball, you know, I'm an amateur, probably, once again, a high school player at best, maybe, you know, small college I could have gotten to if I busted it.
Yeah, you were taking a broom in the paint, though, no doubt about it. I mean, you could rebound, block shots. I mean, you could do your thing.
I was okay. Like I said, high school, but playing it and being unemployed in Los Angeles, it was my church. At 3:00 in the afternoon, I'd go over there and play basketball with all these unemployed actors and musicians. But I could relate to that. Even at Miami, when I was down there, I would play pickup basketball in the afternoon, and I would have dreams of playing drums, and it would segue into all of a sudden I'm full court.
Really?
It was so physical. Yeah, it would transcend. Like,
whoa.
I was playing drums and the physical feel of it, and all of a sudden I'm like running and catching and trying to dunk or something like that. So when you said Johnny would turn off the sound and have his students play, absolutely there is. I think for Hornsby too, you know, Bruce is a more of a mid-level Division I basketball player out of high school. He was very good, probably 6'3" or 6'4" point guard, and we definitely got something out of that for sure.
The other thing is the idea of the roundness of the rhythm of the basketball being round as opposed to just, again, that vertical. The other thing is that when you talk about basketball, you know, everything's happening in the moment. You don't have time to think. I mean, it's similar to Phil playing with Phil or people like Sco or people like that, where they're throwing stuff at you and you're throwing it back at them. There's no real time to think. You have to ad-lib on the fly. And
that's why I was saying that's the basketball analogy. The baseball one is good, but for me with music, it's so immediate. Like Schofield plays something, and I gotta show John I'm listening, or even Bentmont. You know, if Bentmont's playing during John's solo, I gotta acknowledge Bentmont too. Play with him a little bit, incorporate everybody. So I didn't even think of it in that way, but it's the same basketball analogy. Everybody should touch the ball.
You just popped it in my, and there was nothing I hate more, even though I love LeBron James, than it's the equivalent to somebody just wanking it on the bandstand when it's just one-on-one and there's 4 guys on the other side of the court. You know, that's not music.
Sure, man.
You know, I dig it.
Hey, James Harden, man, I saw him play in high school down at Artesia High. I think he was a junior. No beard, young-looking guy. But it was the same thing even in high school. It looked like nobody was trying to cover him. And in the pros, they're trying to cover him, but nobody can cover him. But he's scoring 40 points. But, you know, it's sort of the James Harden thing. You know, it's going to come down to, can the other guys perform? Can the other guys share? Because he can do it for sure. And I know what you mean. I like the communal thing where everybody's, you know, scoring 10 points and getting 10 reads. That's a team that I'd like to be on.
All right. Well, you're 2 for 3. We got one more voice for you, and then we'll break it down.
Okay, man.
Well, I mean anybody that I listen to that I like the way they sounded. I would emulate them, you know, and it went from guys like Gene Krupa or Buddy Rich or Louis Bellson. You know, Elvin Jones, Tony Williams, Jack DeJohnette. You know, I mean, I loved the way all of those guys, you know, played cymbals and the sound of their drums. Max Roach, Art Blakey, they were all people that I was listening to. That my uncle who bought albums for me to check out would, you know, those were the things that he'd play for me. And they were all playing a lot of cymbals, so that's what I grew up listening to. And those guys were big inspirations.
You want to take a guess?
Man, you know, I feel really close to this individual, but I don't know who it is.
Well, you should feel close because, yeah. Actually, I know.
Do I know him?
Not only do you know him, I believe you. It's possible that you. I'm gonna have to look back in my records, but in some way, shape, or form, you and him were. I'm gonna give it away now. It's Steve Gadd.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
man.
Didn't you take
I don't
over
know Steve that well, but I think you know the story about how I heard him in high school.
Exactly. The guy was like, there's 2 drummers. They're really good. One guy has great feel. The other guy has even better feel. That was the story.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the first guy played, and I went, man, he's great. And then Steve sat down. I think I confided in you. It sounded like the kit was like mic'd up. The EQ, the overall sound of the drum kit was just incredible. So that's Steve. Yeah, Steve's a real cat, man.
No, this is what I want to know. Yeah, this is the ultimate. We're going to wrap set 1 here. I mean, Molo has been exhausted from with listening parties and rocking out in Alaska, and we've been cooking here for 70 minutes. But Joe Sample, rest in peace, when what he talked to me about, and what I was asking Steve about was essentially playing time on the top of the kit in a non-bebop setting. I mean, I know that there was this whole idea about dropping bombs, using the bass drum for accent, but you know. What Joe Sample said to me was that he doesn't see younger cats understanding how beautiful the colors of the cymbals are. Reggie Workman, when I interviewed him, he said he'd go see a 45-minute set of great formulaic jazz, and the drummers won't touch the cymbals the entire set. And I look at it and I say, I want Molo to talk about how to use the cymbals, why the cymbals are so important for mood, for vibe, for colors, and maybe even keeping time. Because to me, all I hear when I go see a lot of mod music or, God forbid, EDM, electronic music, I mean, it's pulverizing bass drums. That's all I hear, and I cannot stand it. And I just want, and I want people to know that the cymbals are there for dynamics. And I mean, Styx Hooper, Joe Sample said it all. I mean, that's what made some of that music. And when he's talking about Max Roach and he's talking about Kenny Clark and all these guys, they use the cymbals to keep time too. And I want, as we wrap set one, I want Molo to talk about effective cymbal use and what it does, especially for the spirituality of the music.
Yeah, cymbals are really deep. You know, I mean, some drummers have a love-hate relationship. Some engineers do. Cymbals can eat electric guitars. They can gobble them up. So you got to respect the cymbals. But at the same time, if you go back and listen to like Manfred Eicher, I think the record company was ECM.
Mm-hmm.
Great drummers like Bobby Moses, that crystalline kind of flat ride sound that they got that really lent itself, like Jack DeJohnette with Keith. The use of the cymbals and honoring the cymbals is not just, oh, I'm going to go from a hi-hat to cymbal here. It's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. You know, I have a collection of probably 30 to 40 cymbals. It's not uncommon amongst drummers to have really extensive collections. Max Roach is absolutely a beautiful cymbal player. I was in Washington, D.C. I was about 23 years old. My wife, Nancy, was about 22 years old. We walked into the jazz club. The guy, I didn't realize it at the time, they sat us right down in front of Max's drums. I went, this is unbelievable. And then I thought, well, my wife is the only woman in here under the age of 25, and she looked gorgeous. So they put us right in front of Max. And I think Max played for my wife.
Wow.
And me.
Yeah. Yeah.
but maybe more for my wife. He was just killing it, man. And I was just sitting there listening, and I thought, this guy is so musical. I loved his work with Sonny Rollins. But, you know, what Steve was talking about, all these drummers that he listened to, you know, we know Steve from 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover or the snare drum cadence he plays. But he is such a deep, great musician that plays drums. He's not just a drummer. I mean, he makes these songs come to life. I think his observation of the use of cymbals is incredibly important. And for young drummers to get into the tonality of it. And once again, I think what we touched on before, communal listening, man. Get in there with your drummer buddies or your musician friends that play other instruments and talk to them about it. I mean, when you play jazz, a guy might turn around and say, man, I dig that. You're not going to get that much in pop or rock where the singer turns around and goes, man, I dig your ride cymbal.
You know, that's what I was going to, you just read my mind, because I was going to say, are the cymbals an effective vibrational tool in rock, folk settings, or is it only in jazz?
Man, I don't know. I think it should cross over into both for sure.
Seems to me when I listen to you and Phil, do you use a lot of what does Phil feel about cymbals?
He's so deaf now he can't hear them. I can't believe I just said that, but
that's all right.
You know,
we can edit that. We can edit that out.
The other day we were playing. Yeah, I don't know. Phil and I have this communication that's kind of unspoken, but yeah, he can relate to it. He digs it, I think. But yeah, the other day he asked me. We did "Lady with a Fan" and the Terrapin, and he said, he really wanted me to play bebop. He wanted me to play the cymbals. He didn't want like a boom, with a backbeat, like a bebop sensibility. So he will comment on it every once in a while. He just doesn't, on that one, he just didn't want the drums to be draconian.
Well, he hates, I think one reason you guys have that unspoken, he hates, he can't handle, he hates backbeat, and there.
Yeah, or cowbell, like a real hard cowbell dictating the time. He's not real big on that, so.
Before I let you go,
Anyway.
Molo, is California Kind? Do you have any gigs coming up? I really would love to come see that band.
Yeah, man, come on out. We've got some stuff coming up this summer. Katie has been out with
Steve
on the
Parrish.
road.
Yeah, no, I've been in
Steve
contact
Parrish
with
doing the radio thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also got, I think, Dead and Company, the VIP tent before the gig. So after that, we're going out. We've got a few gigs, and I'll send you the information on those. And of course, we'd love to see you anytime.
And I'll text you, but just don't do it over the air. But text me back your email so I can send you some of these interviews. You're really, in your spare time when you're in the airports or traveling, you're gonna love this shit, man. And thank you.
That's great, man. Thank you so much, Jake.
Yeah, Molo, we'll do it again.
All right, peace out, brother.
Peace, bro. Talk to you soon.
Okay, man.
Bye. Just another whistle stop. John Molo, Greenleaf Rustlers, California Kind, Moon Alice, David Nelson Band, Phil Lesh and Friends. That's it for now. We'll be back. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Peace.
I bring the tourists down.